All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are live. A new report has been released by the Center for Countering Digital Hate, which features the Heartland Institute. The report titled "The New Climate Denial Accuses Climate Realists, like the Heartland Institute, of profiting off of the spread of disinformation and climate denial." The report's authors propose harsher restrictions be imposed by big tech companies to squash the supposed disinformation. Also, Davos kicked off this week, and the main theme of, or one of the main themes of the World Economic Forum conference is combating disinformation. We're going to be talking about all this and more on episode 432 of the In the Tank podcast. All right, welcome to the In the Tank podcast. As always, I am your host, Donald Kendal. And joining me today, I've only got a couple in the can here. I've got Jim Lakely, VP of the Heartland Institute. How are you doing today, good sir?
I'm doing great. You know, it's been so cold in Chicago for the past week that I thought we might get another Jussie Smollett hoax. But we didn't quite get it. But, you know, this cold snap's going to continue. You never know. It's just kind of like Groundhog Day. We'll see.
Yeah, that's my favorite time to assault people is when it's negative 15 degrees outside. So yeah, I'm surprised everybody held back. Also joining us, we have Chris Talgo, editorial director at the Heartland Institute. How are you, good sir?
I'm doing good. You know, it's been a very cold last few days, but the good news is, Donnie, on Monday, it's going to be 36 degrees. I cannot wait.
Oh my God. It's going to be the nicest 36 degrees you've experienced in a while, I'm sure.
It's going to be downright balmy.
That is way too warm for a Jussie Smollett hoax, though. So I guess we had our window and we missed it.
That's right. We did. Audio only listeners. Well, first off, we got a lot to get into this report that I mentioned in the intro. I went through literally every page of it. I am going to rip it to shreds. So you better buckle up for that. But before we get into anything, I do have to put that message out there to our audio only listeners that are watching this, listening to this on iTunes or wherever. And you're probably catching it on a Friday or later. Well, you can join the show a day earlier on Thursdays at noon Central Time, where we are live streaming on Facebook and YouTube and Rumble and X. And you can join in the conversation. You can throw your comments and questions in the chat. Maybe we'll show your comment on the screen. Maybe we'll address your questions on the fly. We also have super chat functionality enabled if you want to support the show that way. Or if you want to support the show by not spending a penny, you can do that by just hitting that like button, subscribing, sharing this content, or just leaving a comment under the video. All those things help break through those big tech algorithms and prevent content like this from being shown to more people. But also, before we get into anything, last week's show, I outlined what I could imagine to have been a pathway to defeat for Donald Trump in the primaries when it comes to him being elected as the Republican presidential candidate. And this hypothetical scenario would have started with Trump underperforming in Iowa compared to the polls. Well, the Iowa caucus occurred on Monday, and Trump did not underperform. In fact, the results were nearly identical to the polls leading up to Monday's caucus. Donald Trump won with 51% of the vote. Second place, DeSantis with 21%, Nikki Haley in third with 19%, and Vivek with nearly 8%. And once the actual caucus officially started, they called the race for Trump within like 15 minutes. That's not an exaggeration. So, Jim, I'll start with you. Did anything on that night of Monday surprise you?
Well, what was his, I think he won 98 of 99 counties. And the one county that he lost by one vote. So I think.
And that county was like a big like college town too, by the way.
Yes, and a lot of the you don't have to be a Republican to vote in the to caucus with the Republicans in the primary. So the story coming out of that was that Haley, a lot of the people who supported Nikki Haley were actually Democrats. But regardless, I think the what was it? I think the last poll said 53% or something was what, and I took the under on that. What did it finally end up being? I think it was probably the over on that. So as I said at the time, what's good about these caucuses and primaries getting going right now is that we don't have to talk about these stupid polls anymore. This is going to be the shortest Republican primary open. Now, mind you, this is an open primary. There's not necessarily, he's considered the incumbent president, but there's not an incumbent Republican president sitting in the White House at the moment. So this is, a supposedly wide open primary, and it could be over before it gets above 40 degrees here in Chicago. And so, yeah, I wanted to see what people will do, how they will choose. And it seems, well, after one caucus, that Trump appears to be unstoppable.
Chris, you asked me if anything surprised me of Monday's caucus. And my response was that I was surprised that there were no surprises. Like, this went basically exactly how you'd expect it. There was no, last minute bump for Nikki Haley that jumped into second place or anything. Trump didn't far out exceed the polls or underperform or anything. Like, it basically went how you would have expected it to go if you were betting on nothing surprising happen. Did anything surprise you?
Yeah, one of the things that did surprise me is that the polls were actually pretty accurate, because the past few election cycles, I've just thrown the polls out because I feel that they are just never even close to being what the vote actually is. But this was very, very close. So it shows to me that the polling was pretty accurate here. And I think I just saw a poll released in New Hampshire that has Donald Trump up 16 points. So he's got a healthy margin there. So you can basically say he's going to win New Hampshire. And then, I think I agree with both of you guys that this is going to be probably the shortest primary season in GOP history. And Donald Trump's going to, walk away with this. And then it's time for the party to coalesce and really make sure.
Will it?
I mean, I don't think it's going to coalesce to the degree that I wanted to, but I think that the signs are already starting to show that some of the, people are seeing the writing on the wall. Ted Cruz already endorsed Donald Trump. Marco Rubio has, and a couple others. So I think that they are starting to see that it's inevitable that Trump's going to win. He's going to be the nominee, and we have to, rally behind Donald Trump.
Yeah, I know that elections are elections and they get heated and people throw, heated rhetoric at each other. And then once the actual vote happens, oh, it's not Lion Ted, it's Lion Ted, that sort of thing. And there was a little bit of that between Trump and Vivek Ramaswamy where, they had a little bit of I don't know, I think Trump was a little more critical of him just leading into Iowa. But then as soon as Iowa was over, Vivek drops out. And all of a sudden it's, hey, this guy's my best friend. So people are speculating Ramaswamy for VP. Do you think that is likely? What do you think?
I don't think so. I think it's going to be, I think he's going to choose a woman. I've been hearing a lot about Elise Stefanik, Kristi Noem, governor of South Dakota, a couple others. I think it's just so early. I'm not even worried about that. I don't think you know what? I mean, I don't think in modern politics that the VP choice is going to, make or break. You constantly.
I bet it could break. I bet it could break.
Yeah,
but it probably can't make. It's I'm going Mike Pence again, doubling down. Jim, it seems like Nikki Haley is almost trying to spin some of this as a success. Is this just a desperation move, or is there any real hope for her?
She came in third. She came in behind DeSantis, and they were both so far behind Trump. I mean, again, 98 of 99 counties, and the one county he lost by a single caucus vote. So there's no way to spin this other than, look, the Republican Party is Trump's, period. I mean, there's just no other way to spin this at all. And, for better or for worse, I think a lot of voters feel that Trump got obviously hosed in the 2020 election. And they feel as if the attacks on him, there was a meme that was always going around when Trump was president. And it said something to the effect that they're not coming after me, they're coming after you. I'm just in the way, meaning Donald Trump. And I think a lot of voters, especially Republicans, after the 2020 debacle, after COVID locked the country down, after all that trauma in people's lives, they feel like they got, and then on top of that, they think they got hosed in the election. So of course, they're going to rally around the guy who got hosed and the man that they supported. So none of this is really very surprising to me. It would have really been a surprise, frankly, if any of the other candidates could have gained any traction on Donald Trump. And as I had said earlier on this podcast, we were going to see if Donald Trump's unique strategy was either brilliant or really, really dumb. And that was to basically not participate in the Republican primary other than have his name on the ballot and not have it get kicked off by leftists who run some states. And it's worked. Obviously, it's worked beautifully. So, good for him on that. In fact, the only way I think Haley and DeSantis could have gained any ground on Donald Trump is if he actually participated in these debates, and he, for his own strategy, smartly did not. And in fact, there were two debates, I believe, scheduled. The New Hampshire primary is on Tuesday. Tuesday, January 23rd. There was a debate scheduled for Thursday and a debate scheduled for Saturday in New Hampshire among the candidates. And now they've both been canceled because Donald Trump's not going to come. Nikki Haley said she doesn't want to debate Ron DeSantis. She's now moving past DeSantis and aiming right for Trump, and Trump's not going to debate, so they canceled him. This is really kind of nuts. I mean, there's been, if you remember the 2016, we ran a pool, like kind of a political death pool with points on how you would get out, based on who got out of the Republican race first. What were there, 17 candidates?
Something like that.
It went on for months and months. And now we only, before any real voting happened, we had 4 or 5 candidates. And then now we basically are down to 1. There's nobody that's going to catch Trump now.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, he's clearly basically the incumbent candidate. I mean, I was looking back at all of the Iowa caucus results of like the previous kind of open primary years, and they were all very close. The one that Trump was involved in, I think Ted Cruz won it, and then Marco Rubio came in second, and then Trump came in third, but they were all within like 2 percentage points of each other. And then if you go back further, I think Rick Santorum won or something like that. And again, it wasn't a wide margin at all. And I looked back like a few more years, and it's just like nothing was even close to a 30-point blowout, like not even close. So yeah, pretty safe to say that he's got it in hand. It's his to lose. He can fumble at the 1-yard line, maybe, but that's the only chance never Trumpers have of him not being the candidate. So,
Donnie, just another thing that stood out to me was the juxtaposition between Joe Biden's polls, literally plummeting to the bottom. He's now at 33% approval rate, point in a president's first term in modern history. And Donald Trump, on the other end of the spectrum is, like this unstoppable force that the voters are just, congregating to in mass. And some of the exit polling out of Iowa, I think, really hit the nail on the head as to why this is happening. There were 3 issues that people are worried sick about: the economy, immigration, and, national security. Joe Biden has done a horrible, horrible job in all 3 of those. Donald Trump did a very good job in all 3 of those. That's why I think, as much as the Democrats might try to make this election about some, abstract concept about saving democracy or whatever, I don't think that's going to fly, because I think that the vast majority of Americans are looking at their bank account, they're looking at the border situation, and they're looking at the fact that the world is potentially on fire. Pakistan just, launched some airstrikes against Iran yesterday. So, you've got that whole, region, on the brink of, maybe a regional war. And I think that Joe Biden has proven himself over these past 3 years that he's just incapable of managing things here at home, let alone managing things abroad. And Donald Trump, I know that everyone didn't love his, personality and all that stuff, but policy-wise, I think that people just are looking back and saying, wow, things were actually pretty good back then, and let's, go back to that. So I think that common sense is going to, win out in November.
So there was rumors going around that Ron DeSantis was going to drop out if he didn't perform well in Iowa. Obviously, that didn't happen. If New Hampshire comes out like overwhelmingly for Trump, he wins by 15 points or something like that. Is this going to carry on, or is it just going to fall apart and we're just going to say, all right, Trump, you got it? What do you think? What do you think, Jim?
This is uncharted political territory. I mean, we've never seen anything like, again, this is supposedly an open primary.
Last 8 years have been uncharted political territory.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for that, for sure.
Yeah, we'll find out, I guess. I don't know. We'll talk more about it next week. But
yeah,
we do have a lot. We have still a lot to talk about. This report I just want to go through like all of it because I spent a lot of time looking at this report. Heartland Institute featured in a new report released just the other day. The report, as I mentioned earlier, was published by the Center for Countering Digital Hate. It is titled The New Climate Denial. All right, so I think that this is part of the narrative that is going to be spun over the next, I don't know, several years or something like that. But the report attempts to do the following. Identify the new strategies of climate deniers, supposedly a shift from old denial, the claim that man-made global warming does not exist, to new denial, the claims that proposed solutions to dealing with climate change won't work. The researchers combed through more than 12,000 videos, or more than 4,400 hours of YouTube content, dating all the way back to the distant year of 2018. They used AI tool to produce and analyze transcripts of all of the content and categorize the climate denial claims into 5 major categories. And then also the report attempts to mobilize climate alarmists to change their strategies to combat the new denial. And this includes social media companies who they say should change their guidelines to censor and to demonetize new denial. So I want to go through this report piece by piece. So the first thing is the new denial versus the old denial. So the AI system they use categorizes the content into 5 categories. The first category, global warming is not happening. The second category, human-generated greenhouse gases are not causing global warming. So those 2 points is what they call old denial. The next 3 categories, number 3, the impacts of global warming are beneficial or harmless. Number 4, climate solutions won't work. And number 5, climate science and the climate movement are unreliable. So these last 3 things make up the new denial. So like I said, this paper is trying to show that climate deniers, like everyone on this podcast apparently, have shifted over the past 5 years from old denial to new denial. So, Jim, before I go any further, and I've got a lot to say, but before I go any further, thoughts on this concept of old denial versus new denial? What do you think?
Well, yeah. Well, first of all, I want to point out that, as you noted, they used AI and they examined 12,000, more than 12,000 videos. And in the report, they singled out 3 YouTube channels for specific mention for, I guess, engaging in speech about the climate and the aim of this report is to silence that speech. That's the whole purpose of putting this out, is to urge Google, Alphabet / YouTube, all of that, to put a muzzle on podcasts like this. But they mentioned 3 channels. PragerU. A lot of people listening and watching this podcast are familiar with Dennis Prager and Prager University. Jordan Peterson. Mm-hmm. Everybody listening and watching this podcast is familiar with Jordan Peterson. And the Heartland Institute. Of all the channels out there, and in fact, I think they had 93 channels. The 3 they mentioned by name, presumably because they are the most dangerous when it comes to this topic, includes the Heartland Institute. That's our main channel. You can find it on YouTube, the Heartland Institute. This podcast is streaming on our Stopping Socialism TV channel, which is also run by the Heartland Institute. So I think that's pretty damn great. And I just wanted to mention that at the top. But this has been going on. When we go through the report, I'm going to start. You're probably going to see my face start getting redder and redder as this report gets me mad. So there could be a Jim rant or 2 coming. This is one of the tropes of the alarmist left, either in the media or in these phony leftist, big time leftist money funded NGOs and nonprofits. Like this one, which is supposedly against digital hate, right? And so I guess talking about the climate in ways that the government and propagandists don't agree with is now a form of digital hate speech. So that's fantastic. But this trope that before people like me and others at the Heartland Institute, we were engaged in old denial because we said that global warming wasn't happening, or we said that human activity was not causing global warming. We've never said that global warming isn't happening. Everybody knows global warming is happening. So that's a complete red herring. And then the idea that, we actually continue to still say that human activity is not causing a climate crisis. That's a basic staple of the messaging of climate realism, and the Heartland Institute continues to say it. But now they've said that, oh, so we've abandoned that because it wasn't working, because we believe the science is settled. So even they have given up on those arguments because they know they're big losers. Yeah. We haven't given up on those arguments. Those are not big losers. They are actually the truth, which is why we keep saying them. But now they spin it around saying, like you said, the new denial is that we've changed our message. You know, the left and the media especially are obsessed with the idea that if you say something differently than you said a year ago, or if you include other things to talk about in your messaging on climate realism, that you've abandoned or you've changed, and that's a big deal, and that's a sign of weakness. That's complete BS. So yes, we do say that the impacts of global warming would either be beneficial or harmless. James Taylor, our president, says that all the time in his public speeches on this. It's one of his main things. It's like global warming's happening, but it's not a big deal. And in fact, it's probably good. It's probably good. And if you've been in the upper Midwest this month, you definitely want to have some global warming going on. And the idea that climate solutions don't work is part of a new denial. Well, yeah. We're focused on the so-called climate solutions because they're being shoved down our throats by Joe Biden and by the United Nations and by the WEF and by states across this country through things like banning gas stoves and mandating electric vehicles and outlawing the internal combustion engine and all of this garbage that is being quickly shoved down our throats. We're supposed to ignore that? Is that what we're supposed to do? We're supposed to just cede all of that ground on that nonsense and keep talking about how global warming isn't happening? Screw off. We can actually walk and chew gum at the same time, and we can actually attack all of your dumb arguments all at once. So I'm going to leave it there. Yeah. Because I didn't want to go on a rant, and I know you want to get through a lot more of this report.
No, all those points are good, and I'm going to expand on half of those. But I just want to harp on these criteria of old denial and new denial a little bit more. So just from my perspective.
All right. I'm sorry. I got a little carried away.
No, it's great. Global warming is happening. Okay. Human greenhouse gases are causing it to an extent, right? Does that rule me out of old denial camp? Am I not allowed in that camp anymore? Because I feel like those are things that most people in the Heartland Institute realm will acknowledge. Like that, like you said, I've heard James Taylor say stuff like that before. You know, to what extent humans cause whatever, you know, that's up for debate. But like those two things are pretty accepted, but whatever. As for the new new denial criteria, the impacts of global warming are beneficial and harmless. I think that there are probably places around the world that benefit more and some that are more negatively impacted. Okay. Like, again, that doesn't seem like a shocking statement. Climate solutions won't work. Yeah, you could put a giant check mark next to my name for that one for sure. And climate science and climate movement are unreliable. You're going to have to pencil my name next to that one pretty clearly too. But Chris, your thoughts on the distinction between these two, old denial and new denial, and where you stand on it.
All right. Well, before I address that, Jim, can you just scroll to the to the front page of this report, please?
The cover shot? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't mind the graphic design. I didn't lay this out. So
okay, so right here, this was produced by a place called the Center for Countering Digital Hate. Okay, over the past 4 months or so, there's been a lot of digital hate going on. But guess what? It's happening online, and it's mostly anti-Semitic. So why are these people honing in on our opinions about climate change and all this stuff as hate? That's not hate speech. It has nothing to do with hate speech. So that makes me question, this entire project, because if they were really trying to counter digital hate, they would be tackling things that are a lot more, worse than people spouting opinions about the climate. So I mean, I'm sorry, but I can't take this thing very seriously. And then, getting to your question about the old versus new denial, I think they're just trying to say, hey, wait a second. You were saying this, 10, 20, 15 years ago. Now you're saying this. So therefore, you're wrong on both counts, which is actually completely, ridiculous, because both things can be true at the same time. Okay. And, there's it's overwhelming, like how ridiculous this is, because I cannot believe that in the year 2024, in the United States of America, it is now considered, at least by these people, hate speech to say something as innocuous as, oh, you know what? I think that, humans burning fossil fuels, yeah, that might not be as bad for the environment as some others think. It's like, no, you can't say that. That's hate speech.
Yeah.
How is that? How is
Wind
that
and solar? That's not the best solution to climate change. Hate speech. How dare you say that?
Right. So it's like, I mean, I reject the entire premise of this thing because
you have all the right to. Just wait, because every part of this I'm going to rip to shreds. So they ran the numbers, and it shows that the content has increasingly, the content from these 96 channels. They covered 96 channels. You said 15 years, only 5 years has increasingly adhered to new denial and lesser with the old denial. And the CEO of this organization in the intro essay speculates that the move is due to the fact that deniers failed to convince the public of old denial. So they're moving on to greener pastures, I guess.
Like I said.
Yeah, right. So I'm not going to challenge the findings. When I saw the report, I assumed that the timeline was much longer. I figured that the shift in categories supposedly occurred over like the span of decades, not 5 years. So it seems a little goofy to me that as if climate and weather related stuff that has happened since 2018 has forced evil climate deniers to reassess their messaging. Like that whole framework just seems a little weak to me. But I think that the findings of this report aren't groundbreaking, and I don't think that they're proof of any of the CEO of this publication's conclusions. I think that it's just an observation based on the data and not some nefarious conspiracy of big oil and all their acolytes that they have in their pocket or something like that. In fact, I have a few theories that could explain the supposed switching of strategies. So let's just float these out there and see what you guys think. Number one, AOC's Green New Deal. That wasn't a thing until February of 2019, right? So a year into this study of 5 years. The Green New Deal became a focal point of the climate change policy agenda, and it also became a focal point for critics of this sort of agenda, right? So now we automatically had some policy thing to point at and say, no, this isn't going to work. That's not a change of strategy. That's just responding to the climate news that's going on. And when, AOC says that we need to rein in cow farts, you make fun of the proposed cow fart ban. That's just what you do. That's not a change of strategy. That's just a reaction to what's in the news. Whereas the many years prior to this period of time of AOC's Green New Deal, Al Gore and his world is going to end stuff was more of the focal point of the global warming conversation. So responding to Al Gore and saying, no, the world's not ending, that would be considered old denial. So it's just kind of reacting to the stuff that's in the news. It's not a change of strategy. And then here's another idea. Even for such a short time period, again, this is like a 5-year time period, a lot of YouTube shows that they covered here are not even 5 years old. So you're looking at the Heartland Institute. Jim, you mentioned that the Heartland Institute is prominently featured in this report. The Climate Change Roundtable show, which is live every Friday at noon Central Time. That's
on the main channel, the Heartland Institute's main channel.
That's right. That's not even 2 years old. So, on the Climate Change Roundtable, because it's a weekly show, they're frequently responding to the climate stories of the week, which often revolve around policy. So just by that nature, they would be considered, new denial. And prior to that show on our channel, our main channel, prior to that show existing, there was a higher proportion of videos on our channel that came from our climate conferences, which are far more centered around the science of climate change and lesser so on the policies. So again, just the fact that the Climate Change Roundtable exists, the makeup of our content on our channel has skewed more towards new denial from quote unquote old denial. It's not like this was some sort of strategy and the board of the Heartland Institute was like, oh, you guys got to talk about this. Nothing like that ever happened. It was just a natural change of the topics that were in the news that we were covering on a more frequent basis.
Yes, so, and they had a specific, and they have citations. They cite specific videos. And one of the videos they cited was from Climate Change Roundtable episode number 7. where Anthony Watts had talked about how the climate modeling is not reliable. It's garbage, garbage in, garbage out. They haven't been right in the past, so why would you think they're going to be right in the future? That is so-called disinformation, potentially hate speech, and needs to be suppressed. And the reason why we are cited so frequently in this report is because exactly what you said, Donnie. We cover this topic like nobody else, and we do it on a weekly basis. And in fact, one of the most fun features of the Climate Change Roundtable show is they start off with the crazy climate news of the week. It is hard for them to do that segment in 30 minutes or less, because there is always so much every week. And so this report is out, and we are targeted because we are very effective in what we do. They are horrified that there's competent competent people who create interesting shows that are often fun, that are countering climate alarmism. It's that fact that makes us a huge threat.
Yeah, I mean, could you imagine if there was no change in strategy towards new denial, right? Could you imagine a weekly show on just like the science of climate change not being like a dire threat? Like, we're seriously going to have every week an episode about how sensitivity rates of CO2 in the atmosphere aren't causing a climate crisis. Like, I think like you would cover all of those topics in the span of like 2 months. You know, you have to cover the policies that are being proposed. It's not an overt, conscious switch of, a nefarious switch of strategies. It's just the way that it works. Well, so Donnie, I think their whole premise is ridiculous.
We're also responding to their changing rhetoric. So I remember back in the day when I was a kid, it was all about global warming, global warming. Okay. In the last few years, they have definitely pivoted away from global warming, and they've, embraced climate change. So, part of our job is to respond to their, new, talking points.
Yeah.
Also, one of the things that they've done in recent years is as this chart shows, they've spouted all these climate solutions like EVs, and you can't have this, type of appliance and all that. And all we're doing is we're responding to them.
Exactly.
So we're just pointing out the facts. And just this week, John Kerry was at Davos, and he was saying all the reports, all the true and actual reporting about EVs not working in the cold, the batteries not charging, and all that kind of stuff. He just said, no, that's just not happening. Mm-hmm. But we're watching it happen in real time, right in front of our very eyes. So how can he say that that's misinformation when it's happening literally the second that he's saying that? So really,
the headline in Chicago was that there was a Tesla graveyard downtown near charging stations. The charging stations didn't work. It was too cold.
Exactly.
We had 3 or 4 days where it did not get above 1 degree at best. And Tesla graveyards out there that won't charge up. And people just abandoned them and walked off. They figure, who's going to steal it? You can't. It's too heavy to haul away, and it can't run.
But one of the things that they've done, and I'm talking about the people who are pushing the alarmist agenda, is that they've gone, to a greater degree of anti-freedom, anti personal liberty policies. And the people are responding to them, and they're saying, no, we don't want to do this. And we're just, voicing that concern, saying not only is this not good for the people, but it's also not good for the economy. And just there's all sorts of implications at play here. And I think that they're very annoyed and upset and angry that how dare they question, our, vision for the future. We've established that that's the way it's going to be. And these people have the audacity to question that and to actually look up the science and prove that we're wrong. And so really it shows me that they are very worried that their climate alarmism propaganda is not, it's not resonating with the public. And that's why they are going to the ultimate tactic of, well, we'll just shut you up and call you a hate monger.
Oh yeah, we'll get to their solutions at the end. Jim, can you scroll down to where it says the blaze and it has a chart? So yeah, in all of these cases, so basically I just reject their entire premise. I think that in all of these cases, it's not climate realists running away from hard truths. It's us following what they're talking about and responding to it for the most part. It's so the whole basis of the report is ridiculous. So anyways, let's talk about some of these case studies that they talk about on some of the channels that they prominently feature in this report. And they show with these, if you're watching the episode on YouTube or Rumble or X or Facebook, you'll see the chart that I'm referring to. But they have these charts that are supposedly illustrating this shift of these prominent channels from old denial to new denial. So their first one that they're talking about is the Blaze, which shows a pretty, like, I don't know, like they didn't talk about climate change denial, quote unquote, very much in the year 2018. You'll see the two lines kind of run parallel to each other. And then it dips in 2020, obviously, because everyone's talking about COVID. They're not talking about, you know, climate change or anything. And then after COVID, you see a massive spike in quote unquote new denial. And then the old denial kind of just stays at that baseline low point level. So is this some sort of shift towards new denial? No. Do you know what that 2021 spike is correlated with? Oh, it's correlated with the release of the Great Reset book. That book came out right then in 2021, right at the beginning of 2021. And guess what? That book is chock full of ESG, fighting back against ESG, and one of the main parts of ESG is it's a supposed solution to combat climate change. And so this wasn't some shift of strategy. This was just Glenn Beck talking about the Great Reset and ESG. This report shows nothing. Chris, go ahead.
What else happened in early 2021? Joe Biden, became the president, and he started, pushing all these crazy policies. So if you think back 2018, 2019, even into 2020, when Donald Trump was in, the White House, we didn't have to have this debate near to the degree that we do today, because Donald Trump was doing away with a lot of these bad policies, and we were congratulating that. We thought that was a great thing. The economy was doing well, and people were doing well. But then 2021 marks the point at which Joe Biden comes in and just declares war on climate change with all the bans and all the mandates and just all the I almost said it, but yeah,
we know. We worked closely with Glenn Beck during that whole rollout of the Great Reset book. That was like his bread and butter content for a year and a half, at least, probably up to the peak of what this chart is showing. That is all directly correlated, not with some nefarious shift of strategy to go to greener pastures or whatever. It coincided with the book's release. So that's what this chart is showing. The next one is Jordan Peterson. If you could scroll down to the Jordan Peterson chart, because I think this one is equally as ridiculous and not revealing of their core point that they're trying to make in this report. But another one of these very influential shows that they mention is Jordan Peterson. And in this chart, once we get it pulled up, there it is. Okay. So this is another chart that's supposedly showing this shift in strategies. But if you look at it, it's basically zeroed out between 2019 and midway through 2020. And that's because Jordan Peterson was out of the public spotlight completely. He was in the hospital for treatment for some condition or whatever. He just literally wasn't doing anything on anything. And then prior to that, his public appearances had nothing to do with climate change, because that wasn't a topic that he talked about at all. He was talking about like philosophy and religion and all of this sort of like, cultural stuff. But he didn't get into that at all. So then once he got back onto the scene, he's hired by Daily Wire. The news of the Great Reset and everything is kind of like the hottest topic. So then they talked about that. Like if you look up Jordan Peterson and ESG, like there is plenty of stuff of him talking about it. Again, it's not some shift of strategy or something. It's just him talking about the climate related stuff that's in the news. So this chart shows absolutely nothing that the report is trying to suggest it's showing.
Yeah. And I mean, again, it's not, the Heartland Institute is one of the first organizations and I guess shows to take the Green New Deal as proposed by AOC seriously. We broke it down. We did a report on it. We said, okay, let's take this policy seriously. It was kind of hard to do in the beginning because it was so crazy. But what happened in 2021 and 2022? Joe Biden put the Green New Deal in his Inflation Reduction Act. So all of these crazy ideas got, again, shoved down our throats. And so, yeah, you got to talk about it. That's not new denial. That is addressing new crazy crap, climate crap that is now becoming policy across the United States and the world.
Right. Yeah, I think that this report is basically just showing the impact of the Great Reset book. Like, I honestly think maybe I'm a little biased, but there's nothing nefarious about this observed shift towards new denial. I assure you, big oil robber barons had zero role in the or influence in the origins, the creative process, or the production of the Great Reset book. I can guarantee you that. So thank you, Center for Countering Digital Hate. Thank you for producing a report that quantifies the cultural impact and political discourse that we had with the book with Glenn Beck. So I just want to thank you. Put out a shout out there, just kind of showing these nice charts, showing the impact that the Great Reset book had. Any last thoughts on this? Because then I want to move on to their whole section that they have about ad revenue, and they're trying to like guilt social media companies into demonetizing this sort of stuff.
Go for it.
All right. So ad revenue. So this is section 10, I think, Jim. The report starts out by listing specific ads that run during these YouTube videos. And they have a little disclaimer saying, we're not trying to shame these people, but they're like showing them their logos and all of that stuff. I just thought was kind of weird. But they're showing this to kind of talk about how much money is involved in this, this climate disinformation that's going around on YouTube. And now listen to this part. This is the first paragraph under that headline there. It says YouTube is potentially making up to $13.4 million a year in ad revenue from channels studied by this report that have posted climate denial content. So YouTube is potentially making $13 million a year in ad revenue from channels studied by this report that have posted climate denial content. I wanted to read that twice because it's missing some core factors that would make that $13 million number credible. Okay. So it goes on to explain how they got their numbers and all of this. They use a social blade, which shows how many views and whatever, all the numbers associated with it. And they just did some basic multiplication. The problem, they counted every view on all of these channels, meaning that they seem to include the ad revenue that Jordan Peterson gets when he does a video about religion or philosophy or one of the other million topics that he discusses. And that's the same with The Blaze. It's not like they're only talking about climate change. They're talking about everything. That's the same with PragerU, Joe Rogan, Epic Times, Newsmax, John Stossel, Andrew Klavan, Lex Friedman. 90% of this list that's on here, they talk about climate change here and there, but it's certainly not their primary topic of coverage. I mean, Joe Rogan might have like every 50th episode might be related to climate change. And I think that's the same with half of these people on this list, if not more. So sure, there are some channels that focus more on climate change. Like there is one in there that's called Energy Future or Ike. Or probably climate resistance. Surely they have maybe primarily climate related stuff, but I would wager that the views of those videos of those channels pale in comparisons to the Joe Rogans and the Epic Times and the John Stossels and the Newsmaxes. So I would bet that out of the $13.4 million attributed to these channels, maybe 5% specifically are climate related. And I am being generous there.
I think you are.
So we're talking about like $650,000, of which the Heartland Institute is making about $45.
Right.
Like this is an absurd claim by them.
I just looked up, I just Googled as you were talking, Donnie, YouTube annual revenue. YouTube itself, and it's for its share of the advertising that they do with their channel partners, which includes us, I suppose, who have monetized channels, was $29.2 billion. So again, this is and Heartland's channel is monetized. This channel is also the Stopping Socialism TV channel is also monetized. Not so much to make money, believe me. We don't make enough money on these things. I think we get maybe $50 a month on this kind of stuff. We are not making a living on this like a lot of people on YouTube do. We monetize. We worked to get the channels monetized because supposedly the algorithm smiles a little bit brighter at channels that are monetized versus those that are not. But we've had a couple of videos go viral completely by accident, and then not by accident because the algorithm actually chose it for the right reasons, because it was popular and it was related to a lot of videos other people were watching. That's kind of how it works. And then it was discovered by a human at YouTube that this is problematic. We can't do this. And then suddenly our videos are going like crazy, and then they just drop right off a cliff because a human being turned off the switch. And we get this happening to us all the time. So yeah, the idea, as you said, not even $1 million, $650,000 perhaps, on not us, not by any stretch, by all of the 90 some channels that they surveyed.
Yeah.
Maybe 600 grand in total revenue for a company that makes $29.2 billion. And that was in 2022, the latest info available. You would a logically thinking person would say, why are you even bothering with these guys? They're so small. How could they possibly have so much influence that you would want to silence them, label them as disinformation peddlers, put, maybe even hate speech, since we have a hate speech organization doing this entire report. The reason why they're doing it is because even though we are small, even though we don't make any money on this, we are enormously effective. They cannot handle a second of speech that counters their agenda, and they will not stand for it. And so no matter how small you are very effective. They will squash you like a bug with every tool they have.
Yeah. It's really unbelievable.
It reminds me, like back in the, medieval era when, someone questioned, the Pope, or someone questioned, oh, wait a second, maybe the Earth isn't the center of the universe. What did they do? They just completely silenced them. They put them in some dungeon and said, you can't say that kind of stuff because you are threatening our power. We're doing the same exact thing. And climate change is the tool to which they are trying to increase their power while making lots of money and control people's lives. And they, I think, are very, very frustrated that we are a thorn in their side, that this, our organization and a few others can influence the population to say that this is all bogus. We don't care about this. And when you see the polls, and climate change is, ranked like 9th out of the 10 most important issues on people's radars, I think that just makes their blood boil and their, steam come out of their ears. So that then they have to resort to drastic tactics. And one of the most drastic tactics is censorship. So I completely agree with Jim's assessment here that this is evidence of how influential we are, because people are seeing through the, climate change, propaganda.
Yeah.
And all we're doing is just pointing out the truth.
I just love this headline, of this section. YouTube makes up to $13 million a year from channels posting climate denial. And it's just like, it's as if, again, they're involved in it in some nefarious way because they get a few extra bucks in their pocket or something like that. And then even when they're trying to do that, which is absurd because 13 million and they even say it is a drop in the bucket to the $29 billion that they make or something. It's still overstating it by probably 95%, if not more. So yeah, it's just an absurd report section in this report. So then we get to the recommendations, and this is where it gets insidious, in my opinion. So it has 3 recommendations. Number 1, Google must update its policy on climate denial content. They talk about how old denial is already against the content guidelines of YouTube, but not new denial, and that needs to be addressed, apparently. So Google must update its policy, says the report. Its current policy is quoted saying, "We do not allow content that contradicts authoritative scientific consensus on climate change." The recommended policy change by this organization thinks that it should be switched to, "We do not allow content that contradicts the authoritative scientific consensus on the causes, impacts, and solutions to climate change." So do you see this? This is what this report is this is what it's all boils down to. They're trying to convince Google and YouTube, Alphabet, whatever, to not allow the monetization of videos that say, wind and solar, not the best when it comes to fighting against climate change. That shouldn't be allowed. That should not be allowed, according to this organization. How bleeping absurd is that? So, that was one of the first things that I saw, because I usually read reports from the bottom up. But that was one of the first things I saw, and I was just blown away by it. I mean, Jim, we could be the biggest. Climate change is going to destroy us all. We need to do something before we all die. But wind and solar is not the best. that shouldn't be allowed according to them. Can you even wrap your head around the mindset that would lead somebody to this conclusion? Because I really can't.
I can, because these are tyrants. These are petty tyrants who are abusing the power and the positions they have on basically monopolistic platforms like YouTube to sign. And you know, let's be honest about it. The ideology of Silicon Valley and places like this skews way farther to the left than a normal American, or certainly than us. So it's an attempt to abuse the power that they wield in these platforms to silence anybody who says, EVs suck. That's apparently now disinformation, and they can't allow you to say EVs suck, even though most people can look outside their windows in the middle of winter and see a Tesla graveyard and think to themselves, I think EVs suck. But you can't say it on YouTube, apparently, but you're allowed to think it. For now, you're allowed to think it your own way. So they are urging, that's what's so amazing about this, scientific consensus on the causes, impacts, and solutions to climate change.
You can't say it.
The idea, that means you can't even say what is obvious, that humans cannot control the climate. We just can't. It is impossible. The Earth is very, very powerful, and reducing CO2 emissions by 10% or going so-called net zero by 2050 is not going to stop climate change. It is absurd. We've had ice ages come and go through human history, and there were no SUVs out there. So the climate is far, far out of our control. But what they're urging to be done here, and again, they use the cloak of countering digital hate. So you better pay attention. This is very important, because we're the watchdogs for digital hate. And so, by the way, if anybody says that wind turbines kill hundreds of thousands of birds and bats every year, no, you can't let people say that on YouTube, because that is criticizing a solution to climate change. Even if you are like Michael Schellenberger, who's been on this podcast, he's become awake on this issue when he was a radical environmentalist just maybe 5 years ago. His preferred solution to climate change, or reducing our CO2 emissions, if you care about that, and I don't, but if you care about that, his preferred solution is to just go nuclear everywhere. Just use nuclear power. Don't build enormous wind turbine operations on the tops of hills where you clear cut all of the forest to put up these wind farms. Don't destroy the habitat of animals by clear cutting and putting up solar panels. Just go nuclear. Now, by this criteria, he'd be in big trouble, because that's not the scientific consensus on the solutions to climate change. Because apparently the people that run the world, frankly, have one solution in mind: drastically reduce your standard of living, drastically increase the energy prices that you pay, and also make that energy less reliable. Any discussion of any other thing, be it fossil fuels or nuclear, is apparently disinformation and needs to be silenced. It needs to be demonetized. It's tyrannical. It's tyrannical, but it seems to be the reflex of these sorts of people.
Yeah, no, it's insane. And that's kind of the main one that I want to talk about. There's the two other solutions kind of just like are supplementary to that. Number one. Number two, digital platforms must demonetize and de-amplify climate denial content.
That's us.
So it says, to support the global efforts. This is directly reading from the report. To support the global efforts to avert climate disaster, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and X should all demonetize and de-amplify new denial content. So again, if you have the audacity to say EVs aren't good, boom, you shouldn't be able to monetize your content.
And it protects advertisers from bankrolling harmful content, like saying EVs suck.
Yeah. So you shouldn't be allowed to question wind and solar. You shouldn't be able to question the ending of fossil fuels, because that's a solution. And you shouldn't be able to, even question ESG, I suppose. Like, do these people understand how crazy this is? And then the third one, number three, climate advocates, basically that they says use this report as a call to action to address new denial. So basically, all of those dedicated to the cause of fighting against climate change should push for legislation. This is in the final paragraph of this section. Should push for legislation that calls for further regulation of digital platforms. So this entire report, on its faulty premises, on its faulty, conclusions and all of that, is all for the purpose of trying to silence shows like ours from talking about these things. It's really, really unbelievable.
Actually, no, sorry, go ahead.
No, you finish. Go do it.
I was just going to say, what really stands out to me is the sentence, "This report should be used as a call to action for those who want to advance progress against climate change." I thought this report was all about countering hate. It has nothing to do with hate. It's actually, oh, whoops. Like, they said that the silent part out loud here. Uh-oh.
Yeah, no kidding. But
well, you kind of skipped over a sentence that I highlighted here on the screen, Donnie.
Go ahead. Go
ahead. This is apparently a conspiracy theory. The statement that humans are not the main cause of global temperature increases. If you believe that, that's a conspiracy theory. And troublingly to these totalitarian leftists at the Center for Countering Digital Hate, they found that 43% of adults and 56% of teenagers who report high activity on social media expressed agreement with that statement, that humans are not the main cause of climate change. That is why this is happening.
Yeah, exactly. Too influential.
Because if people are exposed to even a little bit of logical and scientific-based information, the entire global warming is catastrophe. So we have to basically impose Marxism on the world to save the planet. Falls apart.
What's the last thing I want to say about this report is that, like, does our side ever demand that their blatant disinformation be banned from public platforms? Never. I mean, we every week we point out their misinformation, or we refute the things that they're saying or their claims. But do we ever demand its removal? I seriously can't think of an example. Maybe I'm just like missing something. But when you hear them repeatedly, people on the other side of this debate repeatedly using the 97% of scientists agree, they attribute that to like everything. Whether it's like an existential crisis or solutions to climate change, or we have to abandon fossil fuels, they'll routinely put that 97% number next to it. And that's not the case. That's not the case, like, at all. So do we ever demand that that's taken down from the internet or demonetized? Like, I don't think anyone on our side ever does that. Or these claims that snow is becoming extinct, or the claim that like storms are coming more severe. I mean, on a daily basis, we refute these things, but we never demand that they're taken down. Like, it just doesn't seem to be in our DNA to do that.
But that mindset is far wider than just the climate change, arena. That mindset, which, is the totalitarian, we want to, control speech, and we want to censor anything that we don't want the American people to hear. I think that is across the board. There's so many issues that plays in, whether it's cultural issues, economic issues, all over the place. And what's scary is if they do succeed in shutting up people who are just expressing, concern about the solutions, or, hey, maybe, that model's not right. Well, then is that going to be applied to all of the other things that they want to have a, idea monopoly on? And if so, then we don't live in a free country anymore.
Yeah.
Then we live in the Soviet Union, and we all have to go along to get along. We all have to say what the party wants us to say, even though it's crazy and even though it makes no sense. And that is the scary thing that I just hope we avoid. And that's why we have to plant a flag and make sure that we take a stand on this issue, because if we allow them to say, no, only you can say what we want you to say about climate change, well, then that, slippery slope has been, set, and that Pandora's out of the box, and we just can't let that happen.
I would never dream of doing a study like this with the intention of stopping somebody's ability of talking about things that I think are wrong. I would never dream of creating an artificial intelligence that combs through hours and hours of data to categorize their claims that I think are wrong, with the sole intention of trying to get them demonetized on platforms.
But that's because you're confident in your arguments. They're not confident in their arguments. And that's why I think that is what this all boils down to. They are scared out of their minds that all their science scientific consensus and all this authoritative blah, blah, blah is all falling apart. The American people see right through it. The EV thing is a total bust. The wheels are falling off of it. And they're just like, they're just in like shock mode. So people in shock mode and people who are, you know, desperate resort to desperate measures. And that's why they're saying, okay, well, we just need to literally just shut up everyone who's you know, not in alignment with our message, thinking that, well, then the people will buy it. And, you know, right. I don't want to, like, you know, keep going on here, but Joe Biden, Kamala Harris keep saying the same thing about the economy. They keep telling the American people on, you know, CNN or The View or whatever, the economy is great and you just don't know it yet. But if we just keep telling you that, then you will understand it's great. No, that doesn't work like that. Okay. People make observations in their real world experiences. And when someone sees these, you know, messes with, you know, the EVs or their electricity bill going through the roof or the price of anything going through the roof because of all this stupid climate, you know what, well, then I think that they're going to make up their own minds and they don't want that to happen.
Chris, no, it's just a shift in strategy. See, criticizing Biden on like the, you know, Afghanistan pullout and how that was all messed up. That's old Biden stuff. Everyone shifted, you know, after our meeting with the Koch brothers, everything shifted to new Joe Biden stuff, which I
forgot. I didn't get that.
Yeah, memo. Which is the, you know, criticizing.
Send me that memo from Koch Industries, please.
We'll do. It's a shift of strategies. You didn't get that memo. Got it. All right.
Look, Jim, I value free speech in the First Amendment in our Constitution, which is why I would never ever advocate for silencing people who disagree with me. But that, of course, is the modus operandi of the left. And as we pointed out, and it's because they know they cannot win these arguments on their own, and they know that the data and the science are garbage. But if you had the aim to tackle the biggest purveyors of disinformation in the United States today, you would be going after the New York Times, CNN, ABC, NBC, all of our so-called mainstream media in this country. The list of falsehoods and disinformation that they peddled for the last 3 years, since 2016, is too voluminous to fully catalog, right? But from the Hunter Biden laptop, the Department of Justice just this week admitted, yeah, that wasn't Russian disinformation. That was real. We knew it the whole time. Sorry, here it is in a court filing. To the sources of the pandemic, of the virus of unknown origin and all of that stuff. All sorts of disinformation was released about that when it comes to masking and treatments and all this other stuff. As Chris just pointed out, you know, the economy supposedly being just great. We're told that by our mainstream media. And then even with climate, you get story after story after story about how storms are increasing and extreme weather is on the rise. And this show, plus the Climate Change Roundtable show on Fridays, do something very, very simple. We show the actual data that shows that extreme weather is on the decline, not increasing. That hurricanes are on the decline, not increasing. That acreage burned by forest fires is decreasing, not increasing. And so if you are interested in this sort of thing, Center for Countering Digital Hate, why don't you talk to your buddies at the New York Times and CNN and MSNBC and get them to start telling the truth. And we know why they will not do that. Because they're all in the same propaganda boat. And that's what all of this is about. They want you to believe the lies and the propaganda and not even think about what the truth may be.
Yeah, you know, you're like talking to the author, right? And I think that it's very likely that they'll actually watch this because, you know, organizations, I don't know if they're like a big organization, but surely they're paying attention to all the coverage that their report gets. Like
they mentioned us in the report. They might actually be watching. Hey, guys.
Yeah. Hey guys, shame on you. But yeah, I just can I put out just one last message to these authors if they still held on to an hour into this podcast? Like, what if you're wrong? You know, what if you're wrong specifically about like the solutions that are being proposed here? Like, what if you're wrong about the mal effects that might come with shutting off fossil fuels and mandating that everybody goes to EV? And, you know, the effects of wind and solar and all of that. Like, what if that leads to a lot of pain and misery and the degradation of people's living standards and all of that? And there wasn't anybody anymore that could challenge it and warn, hey, this might lead to pain and suffering and all of that because they were all been demonetized and kicked off of platforms. What if that happens? Are you fine with that? Are you just going to sleep nicely, you know, knowing that, you know, when people are caught off caught off guard when their energy's not working, when all the wind turbines freeze in Texas and people die and all of that sort of stuff. And everyone's like, what? We didn't know. We didn't know this would happen. Are you fine that people not knowing the results of the consequences of these policies are reflected in the what you're suggesting that the Google and all of that should do? Are you fine with that? Like, that just seems a little bit too much for me, but maybe it's fine with you. All right, last thing, real quick, just a few more minutes, but this report also comes out right around the same time as Davos is taking place. And a lot of Davos's content, their conference, is based off a recently released global risks report, which puts, quote unquote, misinformation and disinformation at the top concern global risk over the next 2 years. Higher than extreme weather events, higher than economic downturn, higher than war. So we're going to do I think we're probably end up doing a lot on Davos next week. We're still in the middle of the Davos conference. I obviously haven't watched any panels from today. I've watched several panels and speeches so far over the past couple of days. Some interesting things from Klaus Schwab, some interesting things out of Europe. Big pushes to get Ukraine to join the European Union. How long has that been a thing? I've heard them like trying to get them to join NATO, but the European Union, I didn't know that was going on. But we're going to get into all that more next week as the conference wraps up and we can have time to sift through all of the content of the 200 plus panels. But there is one thing that we have to cover this week, and that is the new Argentina president was at Davos. And Jim, you sent me this tweet earlier, maybe yesterday or something, but I have the same sentiments on the matter. So don't think that I'm ripping off the person that you sent me the tweet of. But when I saw that the Argentine president, what's his name, Milei, was going to Davos, I was a little disappointed. I thought like, oh man, I thought he was going to like be one of these guys that like hack and slash the ruling power structures in Argentina, drastically reduce the size of government, all of that. Now he's going to rub elbows with the elites, cultural elites at Davos. Like, I'm so disappointed. Well, he didn't go there to rub elbows. No, he went there to rub the noses of the global elites in the stain they left on the rug. So we have a clip. We have about a minute clip of his statements at Davos. Let's go ahead and play this video, Jim.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Today, I'm here to tell you that the Western world is in danger. And it is endangered because those who are supposed to have to defend the values of the West are co-opted by a vision of the world that inexorably leads to socialism and thereby to poverty. Unfortunately, in recent decades, motivated by some well-meaning individuals willing to help others, and others motivated by the wish to belong to a privileged caste, the main leaders of the Western world have abandoned the model of freedom for different versions of what we call collectivism. We're here to tell you that collectivist experiments are never the solution to the problems that afflict the citizens of the world. Rather, they are the root cause. Do believe me, no one better placed than us, Argentines, to testify to these 2 points.
I think you could hear a pin drop in that room. I think.
Yeah. Javier Milei went to Davos. Javier Milei went to Davos to throw truth bombs and chew bubblegum. And he's all out of bubblegum.
That's right. Oh, man. When you sent me that clip earlier yesterday, I think, I was just like, oh, thank goodness. Thank goodness that's what he's there for. Oh, that was fantastic. Yeah, hopefully, yes. Christine says, what a brave dude. Yeah, hopefully he makes it out of Davos. Hopefully there's no unfortunate
By the way, I learned today that Milei flew commercial to Davos.
Of course he did. Of course
so
he
he's
did.
Certainly the only world leader to actually fly on a commercial jet instead of a private plane. And
yeah, he wanted to take a sailboat there, but Greta wasn't invited. So
yeah, well, so that tweet I sent you, the guy compared it to Ricky Gervais just absolutely roasting everybody in Hollywood when he was host of the Golden Globe Awards a few years ago. So we actually, if you go to stoppingsocialism.com, we actually have his entire speech translated into English and posted there. And so we probably will be covering that speech and more about Davos and the WEF in the shows to come.
Yeah, Jack has actually been hard at work, I think most of today already, transcribing all of the kind of just like the speeches, standalone speeches, transcribing them and putting the transcripts on stoppingsocialism.com. So if you want to see in text the speeches by like Klaus Schwab and Ursula von der Leyen or whatever, the president of the EU, and all of that, and a few other people, that Malay, Gutierrez from the UN, a handful of others, you can go to stoppingsocialism.com. Chris, final words on any of this stuff before we sign off for the day?
Well, I've been watching a couple of the John Kerry panels, and what he says this year is just unbelievable. I've also done the transcript, and they will be up on stoppingsocialism.com pretty soon, because he is taking the rhetoric to a whole new level.
Yeah, well, this is his farewell tour, I think.
Yeah.
He is going to be stepping down as the climate czar pretty soon here. So, he's got to leave it all on the table. He's going to get as kind of dire with it as he needs to get in this final appearance at Davos. So, yeah, next week, I think we're probably going to either cover it extensively or dedicate the entire episode to Davos, because it'll be wrapped up by the end of Friday. So definitely make sure to tune in next week. I want to thank everybody for joining us for this episode of In the Tank podcast. Join us every week for a new episode. For those that are listening on iTunes, leave a review for us on iTunes. We would greatly appreciate it. You could also join us a day earlier, where we are live streaming on Thursdays at noon Central Time on Facebook and YouTube and X and Rumble. And you can join the conversation. Throw your comments and questions in the chat. Maybe we'll show your comment on the screen. Maybe we'll address your questions on the fly. Super chat functionality enabled if you want to support the show that way. Or if you don't want to spend a penny, but just want to spend a couple of seconds to support the show, hitting that like button, sharing this content, subscribing if you haven't already, or just leaving a comment under the video all helps break through those big tech algorithms that prevent content like this from being shown to more people. If you'd like, you could follow us on Twitter at InTheTankPod, or you can send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to the show by emailing us at inthetankpodcast@gmail.com. Jim Lakely, where can the fine people find you?
You can find me at J Lakely on Twitter, at Heartland Inst on Twitter, and always go to heartland.org.
Fantastic. Chris Talgo, what do you have to pitch today?
So I hope everyone goes to heartland.org, and we do have a new policy study out about the federal spending and how to solve it. So please go check that out. It's called CPI minus X. It's right there on the front page. Can't miss it. And it's definitely worthwhile, because I know we didn't get into this on this episode, but yeah, we are in a very, very dire fiscal state of affairs, and we need to do something about it.
Yep, absolutely. All right, fantastic. We will talk to you all next week.
He's a lion, dog-faced pony soldier.